Street Smart Podcast back at Thrive again this year, and sitting down today with Lee Payne of Cold War Technologies. And Lee and I, we were in the same room a whole bunch around town doing different events and things. It just kind of ultimately ended up becoming pretty good friends, man. And I've gotten to do a lot with him with Wildcat and with Cold War, and it's just a great person to partner with. So Lee, thanks so much for being part of this day.
Yeah, man, you bet. Like, this is one of my favorite events of the year, this conference. And like you said, we just kind of found ourselves in a room at a ton of stuff and just kind of became friends and, been fortunate to be able to work together on several kind of fun little events. And so it's been great.
Yeah, this event's great, if for no other reason than you get to spend a couple days at the ballpark.
Yeah, it's unique in that regard that you get to see pieces, parts of the ballpark that you've never probably got to see before, walk around in certain areas that are normally restricted. And then you actually get to get on the field, which is pretty awesome.
It is pretty cool. And I still think you look like a second baseman. You can probably do it still today.
Baseball wasn't my thing growing up, but I definitely don't think my shoulder would hold up to throwing.
That's right.
Throwing anything far.
So right, you have a busted shoulder now.
Well,
surgically repaired shoulder.
Surgically repaired. I gave golf a go for the first time since the surgery at the driving range the other day. It held up pretty good.
Yeah. Still suck at it, or?
Yeah, actually, this may actually make me better because it makes me not want to go and swing out of my shoes.
You get to slow down.
So it's a little bit nice, smoother swing, and might hit the ball a little bit straighter.
Well, so these podcasts at the events are always a good opportunity for me to kind of break out of what my normal podcast is, and you've been a part of that. Been gracious enough when Upright was working through some studio stuff to let us record there at Cold War's house, and y'all studios there is amazing. But what I wanted to talk to you a bit about today is, your job at Cold War is director of sales and marketing, correct?
Yep.
And you're doing something fairly unique in that you guys are leveraging podcasting and some alternative media styling better than a lot of service companies are. I'll say that. And I wonder, is that something that you saw early on, or was that something that was already happening and you just are sort of capitalizing on it and improving it? And is it something that is happening because you guys have a killer studio and we're like, well, shit, we got to use this thing for something?
Yeah. So I got to correct you. We're a technology company.
Right.
That's right. But seriously, so it was something that we've kind of done all the way along and looked at kind of alternative methods of marketing. And there's certain things when you're a smaller company or starting out as a company, getting your brand out there, getting brand awareness, getting your name out there. And so there's kind of like two steps to it, right? And it's we want people to know like who we are. But then you have to tell them kind of what you are. And so that's been kind of the story of what we've done is, I remember, I started in, it's actually, what is today? Is today the 3rd? No, what is today?
Today's probably the 5th, I think, maybe.
Yeah, so I'm a few days behind. I haven't fixed my watch. So my start date for Cold War was March 2nd, 2020. And small company, I was like, it's like, well,
hey, what a great time to start work, huh?
COVID, right?
Somebody, yeah.
And so I remember, obviously COVID shut down a lot of things, but when COVID, kind of like eased and we were able to go back to conferences and stuff like that, there was a whole lot of people I kind of introduced myself and they say Cold War and they had no idea. And so then it became kind of like, okay, how do we get people to understand and say, okay, I've heard of you at least.
Right.
And then take advantage. And so like from the house to the podcast and different things, it's just really just trying to get, the name Cold War out there and kind of like get that to reverberate within the industry.
Yeah. And it's interesting you say, talking about that brand awareness. I interviewed a guy one time for a marketing role, and he was a younger guy, but he had worked for several years for Red Bull. And we got to talking about marketing, and he was talking about how Red Bull, has leveraged themselves in the market, and obviously they have a strong presence, right? And he said, we'll put it this way. He said, when you think of Red Bull, what do you think about? And I was like, well, like extreme sports and stuff like that. He goes, yeah, we sell drinks.
Yeah.
And he's like, so that's the power of marketing. And that conversation was transformative for me. In that I started realizing that whatever you put out there better be what you want people to think of your brand, of your company, of yourself, of all of those things, because that's what they will think. And so when you're going into those types of, when you're going into that thought process, especially with Cold War, and like you said, you're trying to get out there and really make people understand what it is you bring to the table, who Cold War is, and what you guys do. What are considerations? What are you guys doing? And what do you look at first as you start that process?
Man, it's. Oh, sorry, I got a little distracted.
Yeah, yeah. So this happens to these things, but people stop by and they wave at you.
Uh,
At OTC a couple years ago, we were fortunate to have someone walk straight through the cameras.
oh, that's awesome.
Yeah, it was great.
Yeah,
It was great.
yeah. So yeah, we can maybe edit that out. What was the? Can you start that question over again? Sorry.
Yeah. So it was the question was, when you think about, man, okay, we're starting at square one, and we're Cold War Technologies, and we want to start marketing ourselves as such, and what image we want to put out to the public. Where do you start with that, and where do you start with identifying what that is, and then how to then materialize that
Yeah,
visually?
and so we probably lean too heavy on the brand early on, and trying to get the branding and all of that kind of like associated and known throughout the industry. And with the technology side, especially in oil and gas, like there's sometimes a little bit of a reluctance to like rely upon the buzzwords of the day, right?
Sure.
So if you go back in time, there was digitalization, there was automation, there was ML, and all this stuff that people were throwing around.
AI
right?
now,
Yeah, AI now.
yeah.
And truly, like at the end of the day, you have to have like what is something that you do really well, that you do better than others, and how is that transformative, right? And then you kind of you hit on that, and then the rest of it kind of comes, and you say everything else that you can do. But at the end of the day, people have to understand, especially on the tech side, like what do you do?
Yeah.
And we've seen that kind of like really how we've kind of started to shift a little bit in how we discuss ourselves is like a lot of it's sometimes new and oil and gas where people have been not relying upon technology sometimes or they're starting to adopt it and they need to understand. And so like, like I talk a lot about like we do data. It's like
Right.
we are very good at collecting and
Right.
having organized, structured, complete, accurate data sets. That maybe was not something that we always talked about back, 3 or 4 years ago. But we were talking about the brand and they're it's Cold War, they're techie and everything else, and that was great.
Yeah.
But it's helped build us to kind of who we are today. But now you have to kind of shift that focus a little bit.
Right. And is there a marker when you're looking at that and you're sort of building that brand awareness where you say, okay, here's the sort of here's the threshold where we say, okay, enough of that. Enough people know who we are. And like you said, people probably were like, oh yeah, Cold War, yeah, they do tech something.
Yeah.
But what you guys are is a data warehouse. You guys collect data for people to analyze and provide valuable insight into how to proceed next. And so what did you look for to know that, okay, we're across the threshold of they understand enough about who we are. Now let's start telling people what we do.
Yeah. I think it's hard because it's a lot of that's just in conversation, right? And I think so. Like one of the things that that you mentioned is like there's even some clarity here in this conversation, like like the data warehouse is actually a term in technology, and we're not necessarily a data warehouse,
Right?
Like when it comes to completions and oil and gas, like our goal is we're a data aggregator at the absolutely like floor level. And then we can analyze and we have analytic tools and we have other things. We can feed that data to anywhere you would like that data to flow. And that's kind of what we pride ourselves on. And so there is a time where you're having those discussions where people are like, oh yeah, Cold War, yeah. Do y'all do stuff in completions? Or they'll say something and you're like, okay, we need to do a better job of educating the market on exactly who we are. Because it is great. Like, the first conference I went to and everybody's like, cold who? What is this Cold War?
Right.
Like,
are you guys providing the drinks?
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. What is that? and to now where they're like, oh yeah, Cold War, and then you have to kind of like tweak it. It's a little bit more nuanced in how you want to tweak that messaging and how you want those people to understand who you are. And you can tell like it's in the conversations like they know roughly what you do, but they don't know necessarily everything that you do.
Sure. And I think once you start having to have the more nuanced conversations, that's a great indicator that you're at least through the heavy lifting.
Yeah.
Right? You're through the man. They don't even know who we are, right?
Yep.
And to your point, like you said, people go, oh, do you do something in completions? And that's important for people to understand what segment of the industry that you're targeting, right? I mean, unless they know that, they don't know whether they can use your service or not.
Yeah, 100%. And so, especially, when you look at how many companies are coming up, this space has grown, I knew relatively little. And the best sales job I ever pulled was actually like getting hired here.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, I wasn't the most tech forward guy. I was a guy who knew a bunch of frac and I knew a bunch of, stuff about oil and gas, but I didn't necessarily know how to put the two together. And so you can see in this, like this space, like, there's tech companies here at this event. There's tech oil and gas conferences now. There's all this push. And so I think, you're seeing that, that level of understanding is having to get a little bit more clear.
Yeah. And that's, whether I'm someone who's always loved technology almost to a fault. And it's been refreshing for me being from Midland, Texas and oil and gas my entire life to see the adoption of technology in oil and gas, because we're very traditionally very slow adopters of things like that because it's different and maybe you don't understand it. But I think we're uniquely positioned now to see that sort of tech renaissance. There's going to be a lot of change in the way business is done because of technology. And I think you guys are well positioned to do that. So when you look at, like, you guys are spinning up podcasts and things like that, and when you look at that, what are you looking at to say this is what we need to try to communicate with this specific show?
And some of it is just let's have fun and
Yeah.
show the human element of oil and gas. Because I mean, so when you look at, like, oftentimes our industry is villainized by certain groups of people throughout the country or the world, and that we don't care about the environment and everything else. And so some of it's just fun and showing the human side of who we are as a company.
Showing the actual people behind this whole thing.
Yeah, and then, it shows an element of cold bore that maybe some people don't get to see, like the fun side or just the actually, human side where, like, you don't talk a lot about, like, industry. You talk more about the person sitting across from you. Like, I have the one I play with at the house. Then we've got some others that, we structure it in a way to show the Nerding Out podcast that we actually filmed that out of Calgary, and we've done, I think, one or two here in Houston. That's the more technical guys that are sitting down and literally they're nerding out.
Yeah. Yeah. That way, I listened to a couple of those and it's like, oh, well, that makes sense to those guys, I bet. Yeah.
What that does as a company is it shows like faces of the company that, we don't want to be like one person be like, oh, that's cold bore because they see one person. They want people to see whether it's a podcast like, oh, that's Alex, the CTO. He's on that Nerding Out podcast. He knows what he's talking about. We want to show the bench strength of the company. We want to show how everybody has a big role to play, but it also shows personalities. And that's what's really great about doing like the podcast like we do and some of the other stuff is because there's no other way to do that, to get that out, unless you just go and take them around to every conference. You're like, Justin meet Alex, Alex meet Justin, right? Moving on to the next person, Bill meet, so forth. And you can't really get that. And so it's a way to advertise like the talent that you have in your company and the different personalities.
Right. And it sort of expedites people feeling like they already have a connection personally or know that person. Podcasting is really interesting to me in that it does do that. You can really get a sense of a person's personality through a 20-minute or an hour-long interview or whatever, and that only helps make that personal connection. And so when you are looking at that as a marketing side of things, what types of things are you analyzing to say, okay, well, this is something we need to continue doing, or this is something we maybe need to tweak or completely not do anymore? We're not seeing any results out of that.
Obviously views and stuff like that is one of the, ways to track that. But then, some people may not listen to a long, form podcast. They may get their truck and they want to hear music, but they like seeing like the, 30-second to 2-minute, clip on LinkedIn or Instagram or something else. And that could be just enough to gain their attention. So I think that, as long as it's like, not a disruption and it's not taking away from the actual day to day, the guys, generally people like to go and do it because it's still different, right? It doesn't feel like a chore. And so you kind of weight it from like, okay, how effective is this in actually getting the message out and what are we talking about? And as long as it's more, help than hurt, then obviously, is something to continue going. We were fortunate that we've got the equipment and the ability to do that. They're kind of in-house without, having to go out or doing it kind of like I want to say half-assed, but not,
Right.
effectively doing it.
Right.
But I think, it's a great way to showcase the people from in your company from the very top all the way to the bottom, and having people on just to see that, one, you've got actual human beings working for you, and two, they're actually really damn smart.
Right.
So,
Right. And they are probably not that much different than the person listening. They have the same concerns and things they want to try to get accomplished. And to your point, as long as it's not disruptive to the day to day, I mean, I personally see no reason not to do it. I get asked a lot from people like, "Hey, should I do a podcast?" I was like, number one, do you have time?
Yep.
That would be the number one question I'd ask people. Number one, do you have time? And if you have time, absolutely do it, because it basically costs nothing once you have the equipment, and it's the return on it is sometimes immeasurable. It's hard to, like, views are obviously one of the metrics. I mean, it is what it is. Like, you can look at it and say, man, I got 2,000 views on this thing or whatever, but was that 2,000 people watched the whole thing, or was that 2,000 people clicked on it and went, oh shit, well, I don't want that. So it could be either of those things. So that's a little bit misleading, but at the same time, that's what I tell people. Like, if you have time to do it and you are passionate or interested in what you're talking about, it's going to come through. People are going to be excited to listen to it. And that's the other thing. How do you ensure that what you're talking about is authentic and genuine? Because people can sniff out when it's not.
Yep.
And that's, I think, something that can be a death knell for a podcast.
I mean, that's tough, right? It's got to be, so it's, people don't want to hear somebody fake their way through something that they know what they're talking about. And so it's got to have that genuine feel to your point. And then it's got to be relevant, because if it's not relevant, like, look at, like, and I don't know how he does it, but, like, the king of podcasters is Joe Rogan.
Right.
Like, I don't know how he is able to research everything that he's able to research to actually go and have, like, a reasonable conversation, where it's very rare do you watch Rogan and you're like, he has no clue what he's talking about.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like, and it's interesting. And I know a lot of the times they broach subjects and you can read and stuff like that, but, if you go on and you just try to walk your way through it just to check the box that you have a podcast, well, then people aren't gonna watch and people aren't gonna listen. And you have to have some energy and some fun while you do it, because, like, there's industries that are made by, like, whether it's short clips or long clips. Like, I mean, look at, people will sit there and be addicted to, watching clips on TikTok,
right?
Or Instagram Reels or whatever, like, with shorts. Like, the attention span is sometimes, like, you just want to, like, send a quick message. And so, being able to do that and think of it in that sense, like, not everything has to be an hour. It can be, hey, we're just going to film something really short.
Right.
Pull snippets out.
Well, what's interesting too is, to your point about getting information out so people understand what you do. And we've seen that at Wildcat. We've done a couple things. My podcast has helped a bit, but we also started one internally called the Wildcast, where I'm interviewing some of our employees and those types of things. And one of the direct missions, so we were like, let's see if we can make this work like this. We were going in and we were sitting down talking to people, and they didn't know we did fishing, that we had fishing operations. So we could go out and get stuff out of the hole for you,
Yeah. I was going to be a smart ass and ask, like, Gulf of America or Gulf of Mexico.
That's the coolest thing ever, the Gulf of America. I couldn't refresh my maps fast enough. And I was like, when it finally came up, I was like, wow, that looks great.
Yeah.
Anyhow, and so we were like, let's do this. Let's focus on our fishing side of things and make sure that people understand we do that. And the thought was, it's good. The cost to spin that up is almost nothing. I mean, you can host a podcast on Spotify now for free.
Yep.
I mean, it's free, basically. And we start seeing fishing jobs come in, and we start seeing people understand what we do, and we had a fishing school, and people are starting to attend it. And so, when you look at it like that, I mean, you pick up one thing out of that, it's worth it.
Oh, 100%. And, at the end of the day, like you said, like, you get to talk to, like, the employees, and then you're seeing stuff and talking about maybe things that you didn't notice, like, prior to, and they have ideas, and then you're like, oh, well, shoot, we can push that. And it's just the non-traditional media style. And that's what's taken off when you look at it, like, even like, X, formerly known as Twitter, like, news media has changed as a whole. And so marketing and how you try to, push your company and get people to know it has to change and evolve with that. And so, it doesn't shock me that y'all seen an uptick in that business just now doing that.
Well, and I'm glad because I was like, oh, I hope it works. Like, I hope this works, kind of thing. But so what's on the horizons for Lee Payne and Cold War?
Man, just we're doing great. We're continuing to grow and evolve as a company, and that's what you want. Tech is always live, so you're constantly building and looking at the next new thing and everything else. And so, the smart guys are always coming up with something really good and interesting, and um, it's that's basically it. Is just trying to continue to stay on top and of the technology, to stay on top of the trends, stay on top of the evolution of it, because the industry is changing as a whole, and we talked about it, and it's no longer the well field of we've always done it that way. Now everybody's willing to think outside the box, and I was going to tell this story earlier when we were talking about it. We had a customer that, the superintendent, he told me, like, I'm never going to log into this, never going to log into it. He was like, I've got like 10 years left. When I retire, the laptop's getting turned in. The smartphone they make me carry is going to be broken in half and chucked out the window going about 75, 80 miles an hour. He was like, don't want it. Find a flip phone. I was like, hey, dude, that's fair enough. But, log in, give it a shot. And like 2 days later, he calls me up and he's like, all right, dude, this shit's cool.
Yeah.
Like, this is really cool. He's like, I've got a buddy who over here works for another company, another superintendent. Can I bring him over and show him? And I was like, dude, that's your dashboard. They write data. If your company allows it, cool. And he's like,
Business.
They're like, well, yeah, they don't care. I was like, well, then show it. And all of a sudden, that guy's giving me a call, and he was like, hey, man, this is really cool. And these were two guys that were not tech guys.
Yeah.
And so, as you can see, like we have to talk about those stories too. And that's how, the industry is going to continue to evolve. And guys that are like, man, this is some cool stuff. Like, I'm not going to lie. Like, now I'm not throwing my cell phone out the window anymore. I kind of like it.
Right. That's right. I bet he still does, though.
I'm sure he probably does.
I mean, why not? But that's a great point when you think about these guys that have just a tremendous amount of experience, years on task,
Yep.
and they're used to seeing that data presented a certain way, whether it's in a tally book or on a napkin or whatever they have, or an old dot matrix printer or something like that, to see it on a dashboard now that's really breaking down truly big data type analytics in real time. I bet they're like, man, I wish I had this 50 years ago or whatever.
Oh,
it would have been unbelievable. And so when you see those things, materialize, that's awesome to see.
yeah. And they're getting away from the tally book, and they're no longer having to be a transcriber or type data into a computer, because we're automating that data flow for them to allow them to do what they actually are paid to do, and that's be the expert on pad. And these guys they're actually able to focus on the job instead of focusing on trying to type data.
Yeah, hunt and peck their way through it.
Yeah. And so you're seeing the guys actually get back to where they're having more fun with it too.
Well, they get back, and that's a great message to them as well. Whenever you're talking about change, if you can get to the point of having a conversation with someone where you say, look, what initially attracted you to this job is not what you're getting to do right now, and this will allow that to happen again.
100%.
That's a huge message to people and help them adopt, what it is you're trying to do. So, the Cold War house is probably the coolest house in Houston.
We've been fortunate to have that, and it's been a lot of fun. Hopefully we continue to able to maintain and keep that house. And that's, I always like to say, part of the appeal of that is, like, we connect everybody on pad, so we should connect everybody off pad too. And so I'm a big fan of networking. I'm a big fan of building and broadening your network, and obviously that's how we met. And then you've been coming to the house, we do the poker stuff, we do crawfish and stuff like that. And that's just your human side of it. Like, I love to entertain. I love to meet people. And so, been fortunate and that we have that house and the ability to do so, and a company that kind of embraces that, right?
Yeah.
Because I think that's gone a long way to building our actual brand too. Is, we've had a lot of people come through that house, and people realize that this isn't a place to sell. And that's always been kind of my day one rule one when we started doing the events there was, come in, meet people, build your network. Don't be a weirdo.
Right.
Don't try to sell stuff.
There have been some weirdos.
We've been fortunate that they've been few and far between.
Right. They tend to select themselves out because
Yeah.
the group's like, you're not really belong here.
And so, to do those, sometimes I'm like, oh my gosh, I cannot believe I have to come in and do, host a poker night or whatever. And then I get there and there's, there's people that, have become your friends. And even if it's somebody who's a first time attendee, they become your friend.
Yeah.
And so, and everybody helps each other out, like, with networking. And you've got a bunch of, operators that are showing up to these events now because they understand that it's not like a gimmick. It's truly just a place to enjoy, meet people and sit down and just at a human level meet other people in the industry.
Yeah, and that was one of the most unique things for me, being on the service side of things. A lot of these events, you're always like, hey, here's my card, that kind of stuff. And number one, the house is unique and amazing anyway, and a unique setting for those types of things. But two, the vibe was unique. No matter what the event was, whether it's, like last year, the Crawfish Kentucky Derby thing,
Yep.
or, the monthly poker nights or whatever, the vibe is always one of, hey, we're just hanging out.
Yeah.
We're hanging out. Yeah, we all are in the same industry. And yeah, there might be some business done here, but we're just hanging out. Yep. And I think that's awesome.
Yeah, and that's the fun part of it. Like I said, maybe I coined a new deal where I've got the just got really loud.
Sure did. That's gonna be fun for you later.
Yeah. Maybe I coined a new phrase.
What was that?
The Coldboard connects people on pad and we connect people off pad.
That's not new, man. You've been saying that shit for over a year, dude.
But I haven't said it on your podcast, so it's new for this.
So this is your first time on my podcast?
This is the first time on. But
I've been on yours.
That is true.
And I've recorded there, but that's a good saying. I think, yeah, I like it.
Yeah. I mean, because at the heart, that's me as a person, though. I love, like, meeting new people. Like, it drives my family crazy sometimes and our friends, like, when we go out to dinner, like, just, I'm always friendly. I'm always like, hey, what's up? Or, I'll see somebody we know. Mm-hmm. And then I wind up in a conversation and my wife's like, oh, we just want to sit and eat. Like, what are you doing?
So my wife calls it my science experiment, but I'll, whenever I'm like at the store, grocery store, whatever, I'll always speak to the cashier.
Yeah.
So they have name tags and I'll be like, hey, Lee, how's your day going? Yep. And it takes them completely off guard most of the time. And they'll look up and they'll, great. And you would be surprised how much better my service generally is as a result of just asking how they're doing.
Well, I've always said, so just like, and it's a kindness deal, right? And but that person who's serving food or waiting on you or at the grocery store or anything else could be having the absolute worst day ever. And it takes you nothing just to give a smile back. Hey, what's up? How's your day?
Yeah.
Because they can turn it for them like that.
Yeah.
And so that's how I always treat it. I'm just like, if I'm having a shitty day, probably shouldn't say shitty. If I'm having a crappy day.
Well, it's too late now.
Yeah.
I mean,
twice.
You said it. You said I shouldn't say it. And then you churched it up.
Yeah.
And that's hilarious.
So if I'm having a crappy day, me being a jerk to somebody who I don't even know is not going to make my day any better. So, might make your day even like happier if you're like, hey, what's up? How are you?
Yeah. Yeah. It's funny. My youngest daughter is a server. Her first job is a server at Papacita's in Shenandoah, Woodlands, basically. And man, she'll call me after her shift and she'll be like, you will not believe what happened. And I'm like, yeah, I will.
Oh yeah,
I'll believe that. And I just think like, man, I've never been built that way, so I don't know why people think it's acceptable to treat others like that just because they're in a service role. But then we see that in the oil and gas industry too.
Yep,
getting hammered just because you're in the service side or whatever. And at the end of the day, to your point, if you can smile through that and ask them how their day is going, a lot of time that can recalibrate an entire conversation.
Oh yeah, I mean everybody's under stress and everybody's running around and stuff like that. So yeah, I mean it's all you can do at the end of the day is do your job and do it well and safe and that usually highlights to everybody else that all right, man, he knows what he's doing. Like no reason to be crappy.
Nice.
Churched it up for you.
Yeah, from the get-go that time.
Yeah. I was thinking ahead.
So we don't edit this, so it's anything you've said or whatever is just going to be there.
Oh, dude, I'm going to just start throwing all kinds of words out there right now.
Outstanding.
Like, I'm going to start cussing like you've never even heard of.
Well, I've been around you a little bit. So this is day one of the Thrive Conference. What's Lee Payne looking to get out of it?
Oh man, so like I said at the beginning, this is like one of my favorite conferences of the year. I think Oprah and Daniel put on a great show. I think you get great people in attendance, and I'm looking to hear some of the talks. I'm looking to reconnect with old friends and new friends, and even see people that I see on a regular basis like yourself and some of the other folks. And it's always just a great time to walk around. You're here. It's a beautiful place to have a conference. It's a unique place to have a conference. But I'm looking forward to some of the talks. I'm looking forward to getting down there, sitting around, what the industry has to say. Because if you look at the lineup, it's pretty good.
It's always amazing to me, the lineup they get. And I had said this on the podcast last year here. I've had people tell me before, man, I get tired of hearing the same people over and over and over. And I was like, I don't. I like hearing the same person and how their perspective is changing and sort of fluid in a way.
Yep.
That to me is impactful to hear, this person say this. And there are only so many CEOs of major companies, and we have them here. It's pretty awesome.
And the format, because typically when they speak, it's very guarded, very controlled, and the format here of having the panel, and then you've got people that can ask questions from the audience, and they're not pre-selected, they're not canned. Mm-hmm. So you actually get to hear some pretty interesting thoughts that are kind of sometimes off the cuff.
Yeah.
And sometimes they'll be like, oh, I can't answer that. But then others, it's like, man, they go into, an explanation that you may not have even thought of or heard of. And so, the other is because there may be somebody talking about offshore. I don't know every lineup, but then there's somebody who's going to talk about technology, and there's going to be somebody talk about this. So you get kind of like a well-rounded view of what's going on in the industry. So you usually leave here, well lubricated, well educated.
And what's interesting too is with that being the case, that there are multiple segments of the industry that are going to be discussed at a pretty high level. What's really cool for me is to then you can draw a through line through that and say, okay, well, all segments are focused on this thing.
Yep.
And then you can start deciding whether is that something our business can service, or is that something we need to look at doing or whatever. But it allows for that through line if you really think about it and pay attention.
Yeah, and it's this one I think is going to be interesting, and I haven't heard any of the speakers yet. It's still early on the first day. Obviously the election, in November, the inauguration in January. Chris Wright, who's an industry legend, is the energy secretary. I don't remember the last time we had an energy secretary that was so close to like our industry.
Yeah.
A lot of times it's it was Rick Perry during, the first term of Trump, and some woman, I'm not sure she could spell oil and gas in the last version. And so, with this mandate, and you heard it last night in the presidential address and everything else, the drill baby drill, I'm really interested to see kind of what the industry leaders are, like how they take that, because that's going to, the next, 2 to 4 years are going to be very interesting in activity levels, because, they're talking about new leases. And I want to see kind of like, how do we approach that? Because like historically, like, the price of oil, we don't really want cratering.
Right. Right.
And we don't necessarily want it skyrocketing though either. And so, is it that 75, 85 range is still pretty good, but then you look at nat gas and what nat gas is doing. So I'm sure that some will have kind of some thoughts on that I'll be looking forward to hearing, because I think there's still a lot of people who are kind of like, okay, what are we going to do?
Right.
And Chris being Chris, Chris Wright, got a lot of respect for him. I think he's going to do well in that position. But again, it's, the first time I can remember we've actually had kind of an industry veteran leading that, like, that department. And there's still a lot of challenges that he's got. The strategic reserve has to be refilled. There's a bunch of stuff there that is going to come into play, and he's definitely a guy that looks at all segments of oil and gas, not just he looks at solar, wind, nuclear, everything else. And so it's a whole new kind of frontier on energy.
I do like the fact that Trump does look like he's staffing his cabinet with people that have a real tie to what he's asking them to do. So
Yep.
Whether it's in energy, or whether it's Pete Hegseth being over defense, or whatever, what a revolutionary concept. Let's put people in that have done the job.
Yeah, and we will see what happens.
It may be a disaster, but it's at least different.
It's a different approach than what we've done in the past. Just throwing some people at it and saying, well, I guess they did do something over here, so they've got to be able to run this. And
yeah.
like I said, it's a new frontier, and it's going to be interesting how we approach it.
What's interesting about him being in that position is that he's led large organizations in this sector. So he knows what pressures are there. He knows what stresses are there. He knows when you say, all right, we're gonna go in, we're gonna look for energy independence or whatever it is. He knows what pressures that then exerts on the industry specifically. And like we've talked about in the past, people say, "Well, good, drill, baby, drill," and then we go out there and these drilling companies would leverage themselves to get all these rigs ready to go, and then maybe not materialize like they hoped, and then they're overextended and then everything else. And you've seen that sort of shift in the industry where now they're not doing that as much. They're looking like, okay, well, let's really kind of let's keep our powder dry a little bit and figure out what's going on. I think having Chris in that position is going to be great because he understands those pressures and understands what it means to the industry when he says a thing.
And and I think too, as a whole, we've kind of learned our lesson, perhaps. From going back to like in 15, when late 14 the price of oil drops, and we've got the downturn all the way through 17 roughly. That we're not overextending ourselves, and equipment has gotten more efficient. People have done, they're drilling wells faster. The rigs move are shorter, so you're able to do more with less. And so in some aspect, that's great. The frac fleets, I think we're pretty good. A lot of the, old equipment's being jettisoned for, whether it's E-fleets or newer equipment. So we're not necessarily just saturating the market like we used to. And I think that's probably going to, come into play as well. I think there's going to be the mentality of like, okay, drill, baby, drill. And hey, we're going to go another saturate it like what we've done in the past. I mean, you go back to, I remember 16, 17, the price of oil might jump up like $3 or $4 and everybody's activating frac fleets.
Right. That's right.
We're back. I'm like, hold on. And I was like, we don't even have a home for that frac fleet. So we're not necessarily back, but,
right.
Because everybody just flooded the market and then the price of the services just drops again. And I don't think anybody wants that.
No, not at all. Not at all. Well, man, I'm excited to see what the next couple of days here hold. You guys do anything funky at the Cold War House?
No, staying relatively calm, I think. We don't ever get too funky. But I think there'll be so many dinners and stuff that are going on here, and so just really taking it easy. We've got we're hosting the breakfast tomorrow, so apparently I got to get up early again.
At the house?
No, here we're hosting a breakfast here. Cold War is, and
what are you going to feed us?
Whatever we sponsored. I don't know. I mean, I'm not sure how that even works.
The level of detail that you have on things is staggering at times.
Oh, dude, it's amazing. So, but that's like, like living the gray, be vague about it, and you can never be disappointed.
That's a good point, actually. If you live in the gray, you're never disappointed.
Be nimble and just kind of like, I don't know, it should be cool.
My uncle used to say, "I'm amphibious, man. I can go whatever."
You just kind of go with the flow, and you're never wrong. And so, not a whole lot of insight into what we're doing tomorrow, but apparently I got to get up early.
Food will be there.
Food will be there,
and you have to get up early.
I have to get up early, and so you made me get up early this morning. I'm just kidding.
I mean, this is early to you?
Just joking. I'm a sales guy. What do you expect?
Yeah. It is a little early.
Like, I mean, 9 a.m. is probably early for a lot, unless you have an early morning meeting.
Right. Well,
but typically
I had to leave much earlier than 9 to get here at almost late.
And I think, maybe it's just me, but a lot of my meetings they'd rather do in the evening around happy hour. So not many people want to have a breakfast meeting with me, which is okay with me.
Maybe it's your personality in the morning.
maybe it's that. They're like, oh, this guy, we'd much rather have a beer with him than coffee.
You're definitely that guy.
Yeah.
Well, man, I appreciate you taking time to be here this morning, waking up so early to be here with me.
I know.
And I appreciate you trying to clean your language up somewhat for the podcast.
You make it sound like I'm a degenerate.
You made it sound like that, Lee. I'm just pointing it out.
Oh, man.
But no, man, I do appreciate it. And as always, I've always appreciated our friendship and our ability to connect and work together as partners in the industry, and look forward to continuing that. And can't wait to see what the next couple of days here at Thrive provide.
Yeah, man, excited. Appreciate you having me on as always. Value our friendship, and this is fun.
Absolutely. All right, man. Thanks.